In the spring of 1978, a 22-year-old woman named Pamela Brooks walked into a private medical office in downtown Detroit and emerged with a story that would secure her financial future for nearly 2 decades. She told a wealthy widowed businessman named Harold Lawson that she was carrying his child. She was not. Over the course of the next year, Harold would transfer more than $3.1 million to Pamela through direct payments, real estate purchases, private medical care, and living expenses. He believed he was building a life with the woman he loved and preparing for the arrival of his child. Pamela knew the truth. She had fabricated the pregnancy entirely. But months after her initial lie, something unexpected happened. Pamela became pregnant for real, this time with another man's child. She presented that pregnancy as Harold's, and in the summer of 1979, she gave birth to a baby boy named Michael. Harold signed the birth certificate. He raised Michael as his own son. The lie became the foundation of their lives. For 17 years, Pamela lived in comfort, shielded by Harold's wealth and devotion. Michael grew up in private schools, attended summer camps, and believed Harold Lawson was his biological father. The family appeared stable to neighbors, friends, and distant relatives. But in 1995, a routine medical evaluation uncovered a genetic inconsistency that unraveled everything. A DNA test confirmed what Harold had begun to suspect. Michael was not his son. Pamela's carefully constructed world collapsed in a matter of weeks. This is the story of how one woman used deception, timing, and manipulation to extract millions of dollars from a man who wanted nothing more than a family, and how 17 years later, science revealed the truth she had worked so hard to bury. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Pamela Brooks was born in the summer of 1956 in the West Side neighborhood of Detroit, Michigan. Her childhood was marked by instability. Her father left when she was 4 years old, and her mother worked 2 jobs to keep the family housed. Pamela grew up in a series of cramped apartments along West Grand Boulevard, where the sounds of traffic and late-night arguments bled through thin walls. She attended Cass Technical High School but dropped out in her junior year. She had grown tired of the routine, the lack of opportunity, and the feeling that no matter how hard she worked, she would never escape the cycle of poverty that had defined her mother's life. By the time she turned 18, Pamela had moved out of her mother's apartment and was working at a diner on Woodward Avenue. The pay was low, the hours were long, and the tips were unpredictable. She lived in a rented room above a laundromat on the east side of the city, where the heat barely worked in winter and the landlord rarely responded to complaints. Pamela was intelligent, observant, and deeply aware of the limitations placed on her by circumstance. She watched wealthy men come into the diner with their tailored suits and expensive watches, and she understood that the gap between their lives and hers was not a matter of effort, but of access. She began to believe that the only way to bridge that gap was through strategy, not labor. In early 1978, Pamela accepted a position as a cocktail server at a members-only lounge called the Carriage House on Jefferson Avenue. The lounge catered to Detroit's business elite, men who owned manufacturing plants, real estate portfolios, and investment firms. The interior was decorated with dark wood paneling, leather chairs, and brass fixtures. The clientele was older, predominantly white, and extremely wealthy. Pamela was one of only 2 black women working the floor. She learned quickly how to navigate the space. She kept her interactions professional but warm, never too familiar, never too distant. She listened more than she spoke. She remembered names, drink orders, and personal details. The job paid better than the diner, and the tips were substantial, but Pamela was not interested in tips. She was interested in opportunity. Harold Lawson was a regular at the carriage house. He was 47 years old, a widower, and the owner of a small but profitable chain of hardware stores across southeastern Michigan. His wife had died of cancer 3 years earlier, and he had not remarried. He was quiet, polite, and visibly lonely. He came to the lounge 2 or 3 times a week, always sitting at the same corner table near the window. He drank bourbon, read the newspaper, and rarely engaged in conversation with the other patrons. Pamela noticed him immediately. She recognized the signs of isolation, the vulnerability that came with grief and the absence of family. Harold had no children. His wife had been unable to conceive, and they had never pursued adoption. He had mentioned this once to another server, and the comment had made its way through the staff. Pamela filed the information away. She began serving Harold's table whenever possible. She asked about his day, his business, his opinions on current events. She was never intrusive, but she was present. Harold responded to her attention with gratitude. He began arriving at the lounge more frequently, and he began staying longer. Within a few weeks, their interactions had shifted from professional courtesy to something that resembled friendship. Pamela learned that Harold lived alone in a large house in Grosse Pointe, a wealthy suburb east of Detroit. She learned that he had inherited the hardware business from his father and had expanded it successfully over the past decade. She learned that he was deeply lonely and that he longed for the family he had never been able to build. Harold was not a careless man, but he was emotionally starved, and Pamela understood how to fill that void. By the spring of 1978, Pamela and Harold had begun spending time together outside the lounge. They met for dinner at quiet restaurants in the suburbs. They took drives along the Detroit River. Harold was cautious at first, aware of the age difference and the social dynamics at play, but Pamela was patient. She expressed no interest in his money. She asked for nothing. She listened to his stories about his late wife, his business struggles, and his regrets. She made him feel understood. She made him feel less alone. Harold began to trust her completely. By late April, they had become romantically involved. Pamela moved out of her rented room and into a modest apartment in the Corktown neighborhood that Harold paid for. He covered her rent, her utilities, and her groceries. He bought her clothing, jewelry, and a used car. Pamela expressed gratitude but never greed. She was careful to maintain the appearance of modesty. She did not ask for extravagant gifts. She did not pressure Harold for more than he offered. She was building trust, not suspicion. But Pamela was also building a plan. She understood that Harold's affection, while genuine, was not permanent. She understood that without a formal commitment or a legal tie, she could be replaced or discarded. She needed something that would anchor her position in Harold's life, something that would obligate him financially and emotionally for years to come. She decided that the answer was a child. But Pamela was not pregnant, and she had no intention of waiting to become pregnant naturally. She understood that the appearance of pregnancy could be manipulated, and she understood that Harold's desperation for a family would make him vulnerable to deception. In early June of 1978, Pamela told Harold that she was pregnant. The conversation took place in Harold's home on a Sunday afternoon. Pamela had arrived with groceries and had prepared lunch. After they ate, she sat beside him on the couch and told him that she had missed her period and had taken a home pregnancy test that morning. She said the test was positive. She said she was scared, overwhelmed, and uncertain about what to do. Harold's reaction was immediate and emotional. He embraced her. He told her that he was overjoyed, that this was the answer to everything he had been praying for, that they would face this together. He asked if she wanted to get married. Pamela said she did not want to rush into anything, that she wanted to make sure they were making the right decisions for the baby. Harold respected her caution. He told her that he would support her completely, that she would want for nothing, and that he would be the father he had always dreamed of being. Pamela had expected this response. She had counted on it. Over the following weeks, Harold's support became tangible and overwhelming. He immediately began transferring money into a bank account he opened in Pamela's name at Michigan National Bank. The initial deposit was $50,000. He told her it was for medical expenses, baby supplies, and anything else she might need. He arranged for Pamela to see a private obstetrician at a clinic in Bloomfield Hills, a wealthy suburb north of Detroit. Pamela attended the first appointment alone. She told Harold that the doctor had confirmed the pregnancy and that everything looked healthy. She provided no medical records. Harold did not ask for them. He trusted her completely. Over the next several months, Harold continued to provide financial support at a rate that far exceeded the cost of prenatal care. He purchased a 3-bedroom house in the Boston Edison Historic District of Detroit and placed it in Pamela's name. The house cost $175,000. He furnished it completely. He hired a cleaning service. He paid for private health insurance. He covered all of Pamela's living expenses and gave her a monthly allowance of $5,000 for personal use. By the end of 1978, Harold had spent over $800,000 on Pamela and the pregnancy. Pamela was not pregnant. She had fabricated the entire story. She had never taken a pregnancy test. She had never seen an obstetrician. She had invented the details of her doctor's appointments, the ultrasound results, and the due date. She told Harold that the baby was due in late February of 1979, approximately 9 months from the date of her initial announcement. She wore loose clothing to simulate the appearance of weight gain. She complained of nausea, fatigue, and back pain. She researched pregnancy symptoms and mimicked them carefully. Harold believed every word. He was attentive, protective, and deeply invested in the narrative Pamela had constructed. He began making plans for the baby's arrival. He purchased a crib, a changing table, and a stroller. He cleared out a room in the house to serve as a nursery. He spoke openly with friends and business associates about becoming a father. Pamela's deception had become Harold's reality. But as the months passed, Pamela faced a growing problem. She was not pregnant, and she could not remain not pregnant indefinitely. She understood that Harold would eventually expect to see a baby, and she understood that the absence of a baby would expose her lie and destroy everything she had built. She needed a solution. She found one in a man named Jerome Mitchell. Jerome was a 28-year-old mechanic who worked at a garage on Gratiot Avenue. Pamela had met him in the fall of 1978 at a bar in the Eastern Market neighborhood. He was charming, physically attractive, and unaware of Pamela's relationship with Harold. Pamela began seeing Jerome secretly. She met him at motels in Dearborn and Hamtramck, small cities adjacent to Detroit where the risk of being recognized was minimal. She told Jerome that she was single, that she worked at a department store, and that she lived with a roommate. Jerome had no reason to doubt her. By late November of 1978, Pamela had become pregnant for real. The father was Jerome Mitchell, not Harold Lawson. Pamela's real pregnancy solved the central problem of her deception. She would be able to deliver a baby to Harold as promised, and Harold would never question the child's paternity. Pamela stopped seeing Jerome in early December. She told him that she was moving to Chicago for work and that their relationship had run its course. Jerome accepted the explanation and moved on. Pamela refocused entirely on Harold. She told him that the baby was growing well and that the doctor was pleased with her progress. She attended fictional prenatal appointments and reported back with invented details. Harold continued to provide financial support. By the time Pamela entered her third trimester in the spring of 1979, Harold had spent over $2 million. He had purchased the house, opened multiple bank accounts in Pamela's name, paid for renovations, covered all living expenses, and provided her with direct cash payments that totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars. He had also begun discussing marriage more seriously. Pamela deflected these conversations. She told Harold that she wanted to focus on the baby first, and that they could discuss marriage after the birth. Harold agreed. He was willing to wait. He was willing to do anything Pamela asked. On June 14, 1979, Pamela gave birth to a baby boy at Hutzel Women's Hospital in downtown Detroit. The delivery was uncomplicated. The baby weighed 7 pounds and 3 ounces. Pamela named him Michael Jerome Brooks. She used her own last name and included Jerome's first name as a middle name, a private acknowledgement of the baby's true paternity. Harold was present at the hospital. He held Michael in the delivery room and wept openly. He told Pamela that this was the happiest day of his life. He signed the birth certificate as Michael's father without hesitation. Pamela did not correct him. The birth certificate listed Harold Eugene Lawson as the biological father. It was a legal document. It was also a lie. Harold's financial support intensified after Michael's birth. He hired a full-time nanny to help Pamela with childcare. He paid for private pediatric care. He established a trust fund for Michael with an initial deposit of $500,000. He continued to cover all household expenses and provided Pamela with an increased monthly allowance. By the end of 1979, Harold had spent approximately $3.1 million on Pamela and Michael. He considered it an investment in his family. He considered it the fulfillment of a dream that had been denied to him for decades. Pamela considered it the successful execution of a plan. Throughout the 1980s, Pamela and Michael lived in the house Harold had purchased in the Boston Edison neighborhood. The area was historically significant, known for its large homes and tree-lined streets. The house had high ceilings, hardwood floors, and a spacious backyard. Michael grew up in comfort. He attended private schools. He took piano lessons. He spent summers at camps in northern Michigan. Harold visited regularly, often several times a week. He took Michael to baseball games, museums, and restaurants. He taught him how to ride a bike, how to throw a football, and how to manage money. He was present, devoted, and deeply loving. Michael called him Dad. Harold introduced Michael as his son to everyone he knew. Pamela maintained the deception effortlessly. She attended school events with Harold. She celebrated holidays at his house in Grosse Pointe. She allowed Harold to be involved in every aspect of Michael's upbringing. She never mentioned Jerome Mitchell. She never hinted at the truth. She had successfully transformed a lie into a life. But Pamela's life was built on a foundation that could collapse at any moment. She understood this, and it created a constant undercurrent of anxiety. She avoided situations that might expose the truth. She discouraged Harold from pursuing genetic testing or detailed family medical histories. She carefully managed Michael's interactions with Harold's extended family, who were sparse and geographically distant. She monitored conversations, deflected questions, and maintained strict control over the narrative. For years, this strategy worked. Harold never questioned Michael's paternity. He had no reason to. Michael resembled Pamela, and physical traits could be explained by maternal genetics. Harold's family had been small, and there were no obvious points of comparison. The lie remained hidden, protected by Harold's trust and Pamela's vigilance. As Michael grew older, he began asking questions about his family. He wanted to know about Harold's parents, his medical history, and the traits he might have inherited. Pamela answered these questions carefully, always deferring to Harold for details. Harold provided what information he could, but much of his family history was incomplete. His parents had both died when he was young, and he had few relatives. Michael accepted these explanations without suspicion. He had no reason to doubt that Harold was his biological father. The relationship between Harold and Michael was strong, affectionate, and genuine. Harold had raised Michael from infancy. He had been present for every milestone. He had provided everything Michael needed. Biology, in his mind, was irrelevant, but biology would eventually become impossible to ignore. In the spring of 1995, Harold Lawson began experiencing persistent fatigue and unexplained weight loss. He was 64 years old and had always been in relatively good health. He scheduled an appointment with his physician, Dr. Raymond Keller, at a clinic in Birmingham, Michigan. Dr. Keller conducted a series of tests, including blood work, imaging, and a comprehensive physical examination. The results indicated early-stage prostate cancer. The diagnosis was serious but treatable. Dr. Keller recommended surgery followed by radiation therapy. As part of the pre-surgical evaluation, Dr. Keller requested detailed information about Harold's family medical history. He asked about cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and other hereditary conditions. Harold provided what information he could about his parents and distant relatives. Dr. Keller also asked about Harold's children. Harold told him that he had one son, Michael, who was 16 years old. Dr. Keller requested Michael's blood type as part of the family medical profile. Harold did not know Michael's blood type off the top of his head, but he agreed to obtain the information. Harold called Pamela and asked if she had any medical records that listed Michael's blood type. Pamela hesitated. She told Harold that she would check and get back to him. She never did. Harold called Michael's pediatrician directly and requested the information himself. The pediatrician's office provided it without issue. Michael's blood type was O negative. Harold's blood type, recorded in his own medical file, was AB positive. Dr. Keller noticed the inconsistency immediately. He knew that a parent with AB positive blood could not biologically produce a child with O negative blood. The genetic inheritance of blood types follows strict Mendelian rules. A person with AB blood has one A allele and one B allele. A person with O blood has two O alleles. It is genetically impossible for someone with AB blood to pass an O allele to their child because they do not possess an O allele. Dr. Keller did not immediately confront Harold with this information. He understood the sensitivity of the situation, but he noted the discrepancy in Harold's file and mentioned it privately during a follow-up appointment. Harold was confused at first. He asked Dr. Keller to explain the science behind blood type inheritance. Dr. Keller walked him through the genetics carefully. He explained that the combination of AB positive and O negative was biologically impossible in a parent-child relationship. Harold asked if there could be a mistake in the records. Dr. Keller said it was possible, but unlikely. He suggested that Harold verify Michael's blood type independently if he had any doubts. Harold left the appointment deeply unsettled. He did not immediately confront Pamela. He wanted to be certain before making any accusations. He began reviewing his memories of the pregnancy, the birth, and the early years of Michael's life. He thought about the details Pamela had provided about her prenatal care. He realized that he had never seen any ultrasound images. He had never spoken directly to Pamela's obstetrician. He had never attended a single prenatal appointment. Pamela had always gone alone, and Harold had trusted her completely. He began to understand that his trust might have been misplaced. Harold contacted a private laboratory and arranged for a paternity test. He did not tell Pamela what he was planning. He collected a DNA sample from himself using a cheek swab kit provided by the lab. He asked Michael to provide a sample as well, framing it as part of a routine health screening related to Harold's cancer diagnosis. Michael complied without suspicion. Harold submitted both samples to the laboratory in early June of 1995. The results were delivered 2 weeks later. The test confirmed with 99.9% certainty that Harold Lawson was not Michael's biological father. There was no genetic relationship between them. The child Harold had raised for 16 years was not his son. Harold sat alone in his study in Grosse Pointe and read the report multiple times. He felt a combination of betrayal, grief, and confusion. He had loved Michael unconditionally. He had built his life around the belief that Michael was his child. The revelation that this belief was false did not erase his love, but it shattered the foundation of everything he thought he knew. Harold understood immediately that Pamela had lied to him. He understood that the pregnancy announcement in 1978 had been fabricated, and he understood that the millions of dollars he had spent had been secured through deception. He did not know who Michael's biological father was, and he did not know whether Pamela had been pregnant at all when she first made her claim. But he knew that he needed answers. Harold called Pamela and asked her to come to his house alone. He told her it was urgent. Pamela arrived the following afternoon. She walked into Harold's study and found him sitting behind his desk with the paternity test results in front of him. He did not greet her. He simply slid the document across the desk and asked her to explain. Pamela read the results in silence. Her face remained expressionless. Harold asked her directly if she had lied about the pregnancy in 1978. Pamela did not respond immediately. Harold asked her again, his voice louder this time. Pamela set the document down and looked at him. She told him the truth. She said that she had not been pregnant when she first told him she was. She said that she had fabricated the story to secure financial support. She said that she had become pregnant later with another man and had presented that child as Harold's. She said she had done it because she had no other options, because she had been poor, and because Harold had wanted a family so desperately that she believed he would never question her. Harold listened in silence. When Pamela finished speaking, he asked her to leave. He told her that their relationship was over and that she was no longer welcome in his home. Harold did not immediately cut off all contact with Michael. He understood that Michael was innocent in this situation and that Michael had grown up believing Harold was his father. Harold decided that he would not abandon Michael, but he would no longer provide financial support to Pamela. He contacted his attorney and began the process of removing Pamela from his will and severing all financial ties. He stopped covering Pamela's living expenses. He stopped providing her with a monthly allowance. He reclaimed control of the house in Boston Edison, which was still legally in Pamela's name, by offering to buy her out at market value. Pamela accepted the offer. She had no legal grounds to contest it. Harold paid her $150,000 for the property, a fraction of what he had originally spent. Pamela used the money to move into a modest apartment in the Southfield area, a middle-class suburb north of Detroit. She had no other income. She had not worked a full-time job since 1978. She had become entirely dependent on Harold's financial support, and now that support was gone, Michael learned the truth in the fall of 1995. Harold sat him down and explained the results of the paternity test. He told Michael that he was not his biological father, but that he loved him and would always consider him his son. Michael was devastated. He struggled to process the information. He felt betrayed by Pamela and confused about his own identity. He asked Harold who his real father was. Harold told him that he did not know and that Pamela had not provided any information. Michael confronted Pamela directly. She told him that his biological father was a man she had dated briefly in 1978 and that she had lost contact with him years ago. She did not provide a name. She did not provide any details that would allow Michael to locate him. Michael felt angry and abandoned. His relationship with Pamela became strained and distant. His relationship with Harold, however, remained strong. Harold continued to support Michael emotionally and financially. He paid for Michael's college education. He maintained the trust fund he had established years earlier. He remained present in Michael's life despite the absence of a biological connection. Harold's love for Michael had been real, and it did not diminish because of Pamela's deception. Pamela's life after 1995 was marked by instability and regret. She moved frequently, unable to afford stable housing. She worked a series of low-wage jobs in retail and food service. She struggled with depression and isolation. She had no savings and no safety net. The money she had received from the sale of the house in Boston Edison was depleted within a few years. She applied for public assistance and lived in subsidized housing. She rarely saw Michael, who had distanced himself from her almost completely. She had built her entire life on a lie, and when that lie collapsed, she was left with nothing. The years of comfort and security she had enjoyed were revealed to be temporary, contingent on the maintenance of a deception that could not last forever. Harold Lawson underwent surgery for prostate cancer in the summer of 1995 and completed radiation therapy by the end of the year. The treatment was successful, and he remained cancer-free. He continued to operate his hardware business until his retirement in 2002. He sold the business for a substantial profit and lived comfortably in Grosse Pointe until his death in 2011 at the age of 80. In his will, he left the majority of his estate to Michael, who by that time had graduated from college, established a career in finance, and started a family of his own. Harold left nothing to Pamela. He had not spoken to her in over a decade. Michael eventually hired a private investigator to locate his biological father. The investigator traced Jerome Mitchell to a small town in southern Ohio, where he had moved in the late 1980s. Jerome was contacted and informed that he had a son. He was shocked. He had no knowledge of Pamela's pregnancy and had not seen or heard from her since 1978. A paternity test confirmed that Jerome was Michael's biological father. Michael met Jerome in 2003. The meeting was awkward and emotional. Jerome expressed regret that he had not been present for Michael's childhood, but he had been unaware of Michael's existence. Michael did not blame him. He understood that Jerome had been as much a victim of Pamela's deception as Harold had been. Michael maintained a cordial relationship with Jerome, but continued to consider Harold his real father in every meaningful sense. Pamela Brooks lived alone in a small apartment in the Redford Township area of Detroit until her death in 2019. She was 63 years old. She died of complications related to diabetes and heart disease. She had no significant assets. Her funeral was attended by fewer than a dozen people, none of whom were family. Michael did not attend. He had not seen or spoken to his mother in over 10 years. He had chosen to focus on the family he had built with his wife and children, and he had chosen to honor the memory of Harold Lawson, the man who had raised him and loved him unconditionally despite the absence of a biological connection. The story of Pamela Brooks and Harold Lawson is a story about deception, exploitation, and the consequences of using another person's vulnerability for personal gain. Pamela identified a lonely, grieving man who wanted a family, and she constructed an elaborate lie to extract millions of dollars from him. She fabricated a pregnancy, manipulated his emotions, and used another man's child to secure her financial future. For 17 years, the lie held. But lies, no matter how carefully constructed, are vulnerable to exposure. A routine medical evaluation, a blood type inconsistency, and a DNA test revealed the truth that Pamela had worked so hard to hide. The revelation destroyed her relationship with Harold, fractured her relationship with her son, and left her in the same poverty she had spent her life trying to escape. Harold's story is a reminder that love and trust can make people vulnerable to manipulation. He had wanted a family so desperately that he overlooked warning signs and accepted a narrative that, in hindsight, contained inconsistencies. He spent over $3 million on a woman and a child because he believed they were his family, and he never questioned that belief until science forced him to. But Harold's story is also a testament to the power of unconditional love. When he learned that Michael was not his biological son, he did not abandon him. He continued to support him, to guide him, and to be his father in every way that mattered. Harold understood that fatherhood was not defined by genetics but by presence, care, and commitment. Michael's story is perhaps the most tragic. He spent the first 16 years of his life believing in a family structure that was built on a lie. He grew up secure, loved, and provided for, but the foundation of his identity was false. When the truth emerged, he was forced to reconcile the love he felt for the man who raised him with the betrayal perpetrated by the woman who gave birth to him. He eventually found his biological father, but that relationship could never replace the bond he had formed with Harold. Michael's life was shaped by decisions made by others before he was born, and he carried the weight of those decisions for the rest of his life. The case of Pamela Brooks raises difficult questions about morality, accountability, and the long-term consequences of deception. Pamela was motivated by poverty and a lack of opportunity. She saw Harold as a solution to her financial struggles, and she used the tools available to her, manipulation and deception, to secure that solution. She did not use violence, she did not threaten anyone, she simply lied. But that lie had profound consequences. It cost Harold millions of dollars. It deprived Michael of the truth about his identity. It created a family structure that was fundamentally false. And when the truth emerged, it destroyed everything Pamela had built. She spent the last 2 decades of her life in poverty, isolation, and regret, a stark contrast to the years of comfort she had enjoyed at Harold's expense. This case also highlights the limitations of trust in relationships and the importance of verification in situations involving significant financial or emotional commitments. Harold trusted Pamela completely. He never asked for medical records, he never attended prenatal appointments. He never questioned the timeline or the details of the pregnancy. His trust was rooted in love, but it was also rooted in a desire to believe in something he had wanted for so long. That desire made him vulnerable, and Pamela exploited it. In the years following the revelation, Harold spoke privately about the experience with close friends. He expressed regret not for loving Michael or for providing for him, but for failing to ask the questions that might have revealed the truth earlier. He believed that his own desperation had blinded him to reality, and he carried that knowledge with him for the rest of his life. The story of Pamela Brooks is not unique. Throughout history, individuals have used deception to exploit the vulnerability of others for financial gain. The methods vary, but the underlying dynamic remains the same. One person identifies a weakness in another and constructs a narrative designed to exploit that weakness. In Pamela's case, the weakness was Harold's loneliness and his desire for a family. She understood that a child, or the promise of a child, would create an emotional and financial bond that would be difficult to break. She was correct. Harold supported Pamela and Michael for 17 years, and he continued to support Michael even after learning the truth. The bond he felt was real, even if the biological connection was not. But deception of this kind is inherently unstable. It requires constant vigilance, constant control over information, and the hope that circumstances will never force the truth into the open. In Pamela's case, A medical emergency and a routine blood test created the conditions that led to her exposure. She had no way to anticipate or prevent it. The truth emerged not because of an investigation or a confession, but because of science. DNA testing, which became widely available in the 1990s, made it possible to verify or disprove biological relationships with near certainty. Pamela's lie had survived for 17 years, but it could not survive the precision of genetic analysis. The aftermath of the revelation was devastating for everyone involved. Harold lost the family he thought he had built. Michael lost the certainty of his identity. Pamela lost the life she had constructed through deception. The trust that had held the family together was shattered, and it could not be repaired. Harold and Michael maintained their relationship, but it was forever changed by the knowledge that it was not based on biology. Pamela was cast out entirely, left to face the consequences of her actions alone. She had gambled on a lie and had won for 17 years. But when the lie collapsed, she lost everything. In the years following the exposure, Harold reflected on the experience with a mixture of sadness and clarity. He told close friends that he did not regret raising Michael, but he regretted being deceived. He wished that Pamela had been honest from the beginning. He believed that if she had come to him in 1978 and explained her situation, her poverty, her struggles, he might have helped her anyway. He was a generous man, and he had the resources to support someone in need. But Pamela had chosen deception over honesty, and that choice had poisoned everything that followed. Harold could forgive many things, but he could not forgive the lie that had defined their entire relationship. Michael, for his part, struggled for years to reconcile his feelings about his mother. He understood that she had acted out of desperation, but he also understood that her actions had consequences that extended far beyond her own life. She had deprived him of the truth about his father. She had exploited Harold's love and generosity. She had built a family on a foundation of lies. Michael eventually came to see his mother as a tragic figure, someone whose fear of poverty had driven her to make choices that ultimately destroyed her. But he could not forgive her, and he could not maintain a relationship with her. The distance between them grew over the years, and by the time Pamela died in 2019, they had not spoken in over a decade. The case of Pamela Brooks serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of deception and the fragility of trust. It illustrates how a single lie, told at the right moment to the right person, can reshape lives for decades. It shows how desperation can drive people to make choices that seem justified in the moment, but that carry consequences far beyond what they anticipate. And it demonstrates that truth, no matter how long it is hidden, has a way of emerging. Science, circumstance, or simple chance can expose even the most carefully guarded secrets. Pamela spent 17 years living a life built on a lie. She enjoyed comfort, security, and the benefits of Harold's wealth. But when the truth emerged, all of that disappeared. She was left with nothing but the knowledge that she had destroyed the trust of the people who had loved her, and that knowledge stayed with her until the end of her life. Harold Lawson's legacy is one of love, resilience, and forgiveness. Despite the betrayal he experienced, he chose to continue loving Michael and to continue being his father. He understood that Michael was not responsible for Pamela's deception and that the bond they had formed over 16 years was real and valuable. Harold's decision to maintain that relationship, to continue supporting Michael, and to ensure that Michael was provided for after his death, speaks to the strength of his character and the depth of his love. He was deceived, exploited, and betrayed, but he did not allow that betrayal to define him or to destroy the relationship that mattered most. Michael's life was profoundly shaped by the choices of others. He did not ask to be born into a lie. He did not ask to be the instrument of his mother's deception. But he was, and he has had to live with that reality. He has built a life for himself, a career, a family, and a sense of identity that is rooted in the man who raised him, not the man who fathered him. He honors Harold's memory by living with integrity, by being present for his own children, and by refusing to repeat the patterns of deception that defined his early life. Pamela Brooks died alone, in poverty, and largely forgotten. She had spent the first 22 years of her life struggling to survive, the next 17 years living in comfort secured through deception, and the final 2 decades of her life facing the consequences of her actions. Her story is not one of redemption or transformation. She did not, as far as anyone knows, express genuine remorse for what she had done. She did not attempt to make amends with Harold or with Michael. She simply lived out the remainder of her life in the shadow of the choices she had made in 1978. Those choices had seemed, at the time, like the only path available to her, but they led ultimately to isolation, loss, and regret. The story of Pamela Brooks, Harold Lawson, and Michael is a story about the human capacity for deception, the vulnerability that comes with love and trust, and the long-term consequences of choices made in desperation. It is a story that raises questions about morality, accountability, and the nature of family. It is a story that does not have a simple moral or an easy resolution. It is messy, tragic, and painfully human. And it is a story that reminds us that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to light, and that when it does, the lives built on lies cannot stand.